NITI Aayog సమావేశం అనంతరం CEO Subrahmanyam మీడియాతో మాట్లాడుతున్నారు. ఇప్పుడు ఆ లైవ్ చూద్దాం.
Mutated and all that, and building permits, they were all there. So these were the large number of items that were discussed under ease of living. The Prime Minister just said a couple of things which are equally important. He talked about please strengthen districts and make them drivers of growth. In India, districts are the sizes of provinces in other countries, and our states, many of them are the size of countries. I mean, UP is bigger than Brazil, and so on and so forth. So you have to make districts as drivers of growth. He wanted states to, push. He mentioned about the threat posed by cyber security, and he gave examples of how, with increasing use of more and more advanced technology, it is becoming even more difficult. How you can actually have a fake identity of a person actually talking to you 3D, you will not recognize who that person is. So I think he alerted, because we're all vulnerable and states are more vulnerable. They do not have the kind of systems Government of India has in these things. States covered a large number of issues. There were states which talked about the future, about how they are planning for the future. Some of them raised very interesting issues. An important point which was raised by some ministers, chief ministers, and responded to the PM is the issue of demographic management. I'm using that word because it was used exactly that way. It is about the country actually aging. Your median age today is 28, 29. By 2047, it will be 38, 39. But the number of old people is going to grow from about 130 crores today, 13 crores today, to about 35 crore people then. But the question is, soon after that, it will become a rapidly aging population. A rapidly aging population means you need to start planning for that from now itself. How are you going to take care of them, both economically, socially, their living conditions, their own, welfare systems? That is one. And of course, some chief ministers talked about, very often trying to change a decline in population at a very late stage may not be successful. And a lot of countries have failed to do it. South Korea is an example, Japan is an example, now China is an example. Maybe some states are thinking in terms of managing demography. Quite different from what we were used to, say, 20 years ago or even 10 years ago. That maybe India has crossed the hump, at least some states have crossed the hump. And they may be running into a declining population scenario. So these were the issues. Some of the other interesting thoughts posed by chief ministers were a skill census. And I think that was an interesting idea which is there. There is another interesting idea on linking of rivers, which was posed. I think the broad consensus is let's start beginning link rivers within the state itself, so that you can throw surplus waters from one to the other. And as consensus builds, it can be thrown across rivers in neighboring states. A lot of discussion on clean energy, going renewable, going to green, etc. But at the same time, the need to improve base load capacity, which will require nuclear, hydro, or thermal. That is one of the important points that was discussed. I think broadly, there was another thing, and I think that's very important. And I think the PM also responded to in his closing remark about zero poverty. I think that was very clearly mentioned. It was raised. I think we should stop now talking about, we have delivered services to families now, drinking water, electricity, gas, house, etc. I think we should now start targeting zero poverty and target it at a village level. By village, can we think of a method by which we can declare villages as villages with zero poverty? I think it's a very interesting concept floated by some people in the room. And I think the PM responded, it's a very good idea. Why don't we carry it forward at the village level, declaring places as zero poverty villages. And that way you then are not talking about poverty in percentage or some broad numbers, 20 crore, 30 crores. You're talking of there is nobody poor there. And then moving on to other places. I think it's a very, very interesting concept. I will end here. I've covered about 80% of what was discussed. I took some time. And now I will leave it to the audience for questions. I'll also pass it on to the members and VC who can answer some of the questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Now we'll take questions. I will request that please introduce yourself and your organization. So number 3, start with number 3.
Good evening. I am Priyashmita from Informist Media. I have 2 observations. One is related to the budget. The budget had a mention that after this financial year, the center will start targeting a particular debt to GDP ratio. In this context, the states would also have to set a particular debt to GDP ratio for themselves. So I just would want to ask, considering fiscal prudence is something that is on the panel for the governing council body, were there any conversation on this? And quickly, since Virmani sir is also here, who has great perspective on trade, I would like to ask, the budget also mentions about FDI from China. So since you're speaking about making states competitive for FDI, how do you see this Chinese FDI working out for India, especially when we have actually taken trade protectionist measures like anti-dumping duties or import restrictions? So these two things, please. Thank you.
I'll give a quick answer and then give it to Dr. Virmani. Neither of the two were discussed, so I'm putting it up front because they were not on the agenda. But I'm sure at some point in the future they will need to be discussed. Dr. Virmani?
You know, I don't think, I think this discussion is about the NITI program and what we discussed.